I warned my son that his fiancée was trouble, and he threatened me with a restraining order. And now, he's begging me for money. I'm a 52-year-old single dad, and my son is 22. He's always been a bit unpredictable, but I really thought I raised him to have some common sense. He's into skateboarding, did fine in school, and usually listened when I laid down rules. But lately, something's been off. He's glued to his phone, texting constantly. I asked him who he was talking to, and he just said, a friend. It struck me as odd that he wouldn't say who, but I shrugged it off. Fast forward a little. He insisted that I meet the girl he was dating. We went to a cafe, and there she was, 25 years old, caked in makeup, wearing flashy jewelry. Her laugh was so obviously fake, it grated on me, like that character from The Nanny. Yeah, I know, I'm old. She said she was finding out what life had in store for her, and that she was staying at a friend's place. No real plans. No stability. Just talk about living in the moment. The whole vibe was off. Honestly, she seemed like a parasite looking for a host, someone who could fund her lifestyle. Meanwhile, my son looked completely enchanted. He smiled like an idiot, saying she was his future, after barely a month of dating. I let it slide at first, assuming it was just a passing phase and it would blow over soon enough. But then, I overheard them on the phone at my house, talking about how serious their relationship was. Too serious. And apparently, I was part of their plan. She was pressuring him to move into an apartment, one that I'd be paying for, with the savings I had set aside for him years ago. When he got off the call, I told him, she's moving way too fast. She's after something, and it's not love, it's your money. But he didn't want to hear it. Instead, he snapped at me, said I was just a bitter old man who didn't believe in love anymore because of my past. That I lived my life angry and alone because I'd given up on happiness. We started yelling. He accused me of not trusting his choices, and okay, maybe he was right about that. But it was the first time he ever spoke to me like that. And the first time he'd done something so flat-out stupid, but honestly, I wasn't confident that he was making the right decision. Then, he told me she would be moving in with him to a new apartment. I was not happy about it. The savings he was talking about, that was money I'd set aside years ago for his future, not for him to blow on a wedding with a woman who, besides giving me a terrible feeling, I barely even knew. I did a little digging online, because I'm not that old, after all, and found some of her old posts. She'd shared memes bragging about manipulating guys into giving her money. There were tons of photos of her out partying all night long. Look, I'm not so out of touch that I think young people can't have fun. But I wouldn't marry someone who's probably still hungover when they bring up the idea of getting married. I showed all of this to my son, thinking he'd finally see the truth, thinking he'd recognize the red flags waving right in his face. But no. Instead, he accused me of invading his privacy, called me jealous, and said that if I kept pushing it, he'd cut me out of his life. He said if I couldn't accept the love he'd found, it wouldn't be hard for him to walk away from me and fight for it without me. Fast forward a little more. She proposed to him. Yes, you read that right, she proposed. And it's not that I have a problem with a woman proposing. That's not it at all. The issue was how blatantly she was trying to trap him, and how blind he was to it. She did it in some cheap bar, making a big public scene with a cheap ring she supposedly bought herself, though honestly, she might have stolen it right off someone's hand a minute before. He said yes. They set the wedding date, just 3 months after meeting. I was speechless. 3 months, and he was marrying a woman with no job, a sketchy past, and no real plans for the future. I sat him down and explained it the best way I could. I said, look, she has no stability. She has a pattern of questionable behavior. You're rushing into a disaster. If you go through with this, you'll be left broken. He listened. I really think he did, but he didn't understand a word. He said, "You're not invited to the wedding unless you support us without asking questions." I told him I wasn't asking questions, I was giving him facts. Facts anyone could confirm with a basic search. When I mentioned this might be the biggest mistake of his life, if not a new personal record, he just glared at me, furious. In the end, he said I had no right to ruin his day and told me to forget about the wedding, and about any future contact with him. But I didn't stop trying, not as a father. I could see the atomic explosion of his life coming, and I wasn't going to give up on him without a fight. I reached out to her mother. I thought maybe she'd be more grounded. We met at a diner, and I told her everything, how her daughter was moving too fast, had no direction, and my son was too young to tie himself down like this. She didn't care. Foolish of me to think her daughter turned out that way by chance. Turns out, she had a great teacher. She called her daughter a free spirit, and then had the nerve to ask me if I could help with the wedding expenses. I laughed in her face and said there was no way I'd fund a disaster. She got angry and stormed out, leaving me there thinking about the insane family my son was about to marry into. Later that night, my son called me, screaming because I had spoken to his future mother-in-law. He said I'd crossed a line, and that if I didn't back off, he wouldn't hesitate to file a restraining order against me. And you know what? I get it. Maybe I was interfering. But I was doing it for the right reasons. It didn't matter how great his fiancée might have seemed, which, to be clear, she didn't. It was a terrible idea to marry someone you've known for just 3 months. But you can't threaten someone with a restraining order and then ask for access to a $10,000 savings account I had set aside for you years ago. I explained it clearly, it wasn't emergency money, and it sure wasn't meant to pay for a wedding. But someone who makes impulsive decisions isn't going to take no easily, not without getting angry and acting entitled. He blocked my number. Cut me off entirely. Then she messaged me, so smug, saying, "You've lost, because your son chose love over a bitter old man like you." I didn't reply. I didn't want to play that game anymore. I didn't want to be involved in their mess. There's only so much a parent can do for their child. He'd never been this infatuated, this obsessed with anyone before. His past relationships were more normal. Honestly, dating a palm tree would have been more normal than this. But I tried. I tried to open his eyes because I could see he was headed for disaster and needed help. But when you push too hard, when the person doesn't want to be helped, there's only so much you can do. Sometimes, you just have to let the palm tree drop a coconut on their head and hope it wakes them up. I had no more options, and no energy left to try. What had to happen would happen. The wedding day came, and I wasn't there. He'd made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I supported them, and I didn't. So I stayed away. Someone who was there told me how it went. Apparently, it was a ridiculous circus. The venue was fine, and there was an open bar, which isn't cheap. She wore a dress that, if I asked you to close your eyes and picture a free spirit, you'd see it perfectly. To pay for everything, they took out loans and maxed out credit cards, racking up debt like it meant nothing. I was furious, not just at her, but at him, for being so blind. But it wasn't my money. After that, I didn't reach out again. I didn't want to be at ground zero when the whole thing blew up. He wanted me out of his life, so I stayed out. He's an adult, and I'm not going to chase him to save him from his own stupidity. Besides, marrying someone like her after only 3 months, plus all that debt, that's a ticking time bomb in my head. Still, I can't help but feel angry. And helpless. Maybe that's why I'm writing this. Update 1. If I had bet on it, I think I would have bet that the whole thing would fall apart much sooner. But I guess as long as there was money, the relationship kept going. Someone who went to the wedding still keeps me updated on everything that happens. They told me, "Your son is working himself to death doing overtime shifts at a warehouse, trying to cover the bills." Meanwhile, she doesn't lift a finger. She just sits around posting on social media about all the things they're spending money on. They're living way beyond their means. I don't know how they're affording any of it, unless your son secretly became a neurosurgeon and didn't tell you. They're in big trouble. I'm still blocked, still honoring his request to not contact him if I don't have anything nice to say. And so far, I haven't found anything nice to say. Some time passed, and things started to spiral. My son's best friend messaged me, saying they were in serious trouble. Their utilities got cut off, she'd been throwing money around like nothing mattered, and my son was too proud to admit he was drowning. He's working himself into the ground but still can't keep up with rent and bills. His friend told me he's stressed out, barely sleeping, and snapping at everyone. Even so, I kept my distance. Call me whatever you want, but this, whatever, wasn't going to help him. Not unless he asked. And up to that point, he hadn't. Then, her fraud case came to light. She was convicted for a scam she pulled a few years ago, something about faking a medical emergency to get donations online. Now she owes thousands in restitution. The problem is, for some reason, my son is involved, even if it happened before he met her. I don't know, maybe the scam was already in motion when she found him. Either way, his name is now tied to the case. His friend begged me to help pay for a lawyer to get him out of the legal mess. I said no. But things kept getting worse. Someone saw her at a club, hanging all over some other guy, while my son was supposedly working a night shift. They sent me pictures, her laughing, with her arm around the guy's neck, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. I guess that's what they call being free. The person asked me what I wanted to do with the pictures, should they send them to my son or not. I told them I wasn't going to send anything, but they were free to do what they wanted. Either way, my son wouldn't believe me. He'd probably accuse me of editing the photos or trying to sabotage them. His friend told me that my son is living a miserable life. He knows she's not behaving right, but he feels trapped by the loans they took out for the wedding, and by all the money she's burned through. I just shrugged when I heard that. Not my circus. Not my monkeys. The last I heard, things are even worse. They're about to get evicted. They haven't paid rent in months, and the landlord is preparing to kick them out. I'm not going to cover their rent. I'm not going to bail him out of this mess. Then her mother called me, complaining that the kids are struggling, asking if I could send some money to help them get by. I gave her a little existential question. Something like, if you're such a free spirit, maybe you can freely help them. A soul in distress yearns for freedom, and maybe you could provide it. Isn't it always noble to fight for a good cause? She answered that she had her own bills and couldn't give them that kind of money. Looks like the spirit is free, but the bills still pile up. And someone's got to be financially responsible. Easier said than done, right? Everyone talks big, until you toss around blame and responsibility. Then suddenly, they all vanish in a puff of smoke. Update 2. It's been a while since my last post, but finally, my son did what he should have done long ago. He left that walking money shredder. One day, he showed up at my door, looking like a broken-down ATM. And honestly, he wasn't far off. Because even if he doesn't have circuits inside him, he said she had cleaned out their joint bank account and left him high and dry, with $20,000 in debt. He got fired from his warehouse job for missing too many shifts, probably because he was too busy playing ATM on the corner of heartbreak and bankruptcy. He was there asking for money, saying he just needed a little help to start over. I told him to get lost. He stood there whining about how cold it was outside. I pointed at the door, just in case he'd forgotten where it was. And he left, still crying. And then, get this, her mother had the audacity to call me, screaming that I was the reason their marriage fell apart. All because I didn't support them. I told her to take a good look at her daughter, who scammed my son and ran off. I looked it up online and sure enough, she's already living with another guy. Posting pictures of her new victim, partner, the next guy she's going to drain dry and toss to the sharks. My son saw the post. His friend told me it crushed him. At least he's keeping that heartbreak far away from me. I imagine he's way too ashamed to ask me for help face to face again. Instead, he tried sending me a text, asking if he could move back in. Said he didn't even have enough to afford a lawyer. I told him, "You're a grown man. You made your choices. And I'm not turning my house into a hotel for people with a giant 'I told you so' sign on their forehead." His response? Another message where he suggested maybe I hadn't warned him enough, and that I should feel bad for him. But I don't. I didn't hand over all my money to his ex, so I don't know why I should feel bad at all. Right now, I've got leftover roast beef, mashed potatoes, and gravy from last night waiting for me to heat up. I'm in paradise. His friend told me he's been sleeping on their couch. But it's a small couch, not comfortable, just sleepable. She tried texting him, saying she made a mistake and wanted to talk. His friend had to step in to keep him from falling back into that trap. At least now, he's got a job at a gas station. I don't know if that's much of an upgrade from the warehouse, but hey, it's something. He's moving forward, and that's more than he was doing before. I know not everyone will agree with my hands-off, carefree approach to dealing with my son's meltdown. I don't want him to suffer, but I'm not lifting a finger after what he put me through. Why did my warnings bother him so much that he threatened me with a restraining order? Maybe that gave me an idea, actually. But yeah, I'm keeping my distance now, watching from afar, not worrying too much about it anymore. Especially now that my dinner's almost done reheating, and I can already smell it from the kitchen. Time to close the laptop and enjoy dinner. Maybe I'll open it up later to read your comments. Update 3. Here's the situation now. My son is still a mess, sleeping in a shelter after she left him completely broke and saddled with $20,000 in debt. His friend keeps me updated, says he's barely scraping by. He's working at a gas station, eating the bare minimum, and dodging debt collectors like it's an Olympic sport, and he's training for the gold medal. He wants to file for bankruptcy, but even that takes money he still doesn't have. Some of you asked about my ex-daughter-in-law's new boyfriend, wondering if she's gearing up for another scam. I'd be lying if I said I knew for certain, but I can say with 100% confidence, yes, she is. I mean, we're talking about the same woman here. From what I've heard, she's still with the new guy she ran off with, posting all about her new life, filled with fancy dinners and all the Instagram-worthy nonsense. He doesn't look much older than 30, and from what I can tell, judging by his car and all the places she tags him at, he's got some money. A few people even suggested I should try to warn him. But I thought to myself, why would a guy who doesn't know me believe a word I say, when my own son didn't? Still, the other day I gathered some screenshots and sent him a message anyway. I figured, what do I have to lose? What's the worst that could happen? A total stranger doesn't invite me to his wedding and cuts me out of his life? That's basically a walk in the park for me at this point. I never got a reply. But I did notice that shortly after, she stopped mentioning him in her posts. So I guess he got the message, and maybe, just maybe, he listened more than my own son did. Now look, he's still my son. I've got to own up to at least some responsibility for how he turned out. I'm no genius, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I didn't think my kid would inherit only the dumb parts of me and toss the rest out the window. But hey, sometimes life has to do the teaching, and life is hitting him with some pretty heavy lessons right now. Not from me, though. I'm done swinging. I'll just be here, watching life do what it does best. Update 4. My son is still in a bad situation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it just to make myself look better, because I'm not actively helping. Well, not passively either. He's still stuck in a shelter, working a dead-end job at a gas station, dodging debt collectors like it's his life's purpose. His friend keeps me updated, says he's barely hanging on, eating cheap noodles and looking like he's aged 10 years. At least he managed to file for bankruptcy. Now, he doesn't have any credit cards or rental scores worth mentioning, unless he wants to pay months of rent up front. But still, it's a step forward. It'll take time to rebuild his credit score, but at this point, he doesn't have any other way out. It'll be years before he fully recovers from this mess. But that's what happens when you date a walking red flag for weeks, decide to get married, and tie the knot in just 3 months. It's going to be a long time before he thinks about marriage again. That, I suppose, means the lesson was learned. On a more positive note, regarding his ex-wife's scam, the one he's now officially divorced from, he's finally free of that particular mess. The debts from the wedding and everything else haven't gone away, but the scam itself is no longer something he's legally tied to. The authorities are still investigating his ex, and they've concluded that my son wasn't involved. The investigation is still ongoing, which probably explains why she's gone radio silent on social media. No more posts about her new boyfriend, although a few pictures with him are still up. He's nowhere to be seen anymore. She's keeping a low profile now, and she'll need to, with all her scams catching up to her. I've heard my son wants to sue her for fraud. But I'm not going to tell him what to do. Personally, I don't think spending all your money, and money you didn't even have, on someone and then suing them counts as fraud. I'd call it using the wrong head. I had some hope that he was learning. That he was getting smarter. That he was starting to figure out how the world works. But instead, it's been 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We could be optimistic and say that at least there's some progress. But the pessimist in me, the realist, thinks that after everything that's happened, it really should have been all forward from here. That said, I'll admit something did bring a tear to my eye, not from sadness, but from sheer joy. The investigation has now decided to implicate her mother in the fraud case as well. I'm starting to think that being free-spirited beams of light also comes with a little extra trait, like being scammers. Why am I not surprised? But I won't lie, it definitely put me in a good mood. So that's a summary of everything that's been happening in my life lately. And no, I don't have any more of that roast beef left. It was gone the same night. Believe me, I wouldn't joke about something like that. I wish I had more right now instead of this flavorless food waiting for me. Maybe it's time for a grocery run, so I can cook myself another round of that heavenly meal. Update 5. You know what's waiting for me in the oven once I finish writing this update? A giant casserole dish of mashed potatoes. That's right. So if this has spelling errors or feels rushed, you know why. Duty calls. And you might be wondering why I'm all dressed up today, even if you can't see how good I look for a meal at home. It's not because of the dinner. I dressed up because I'm celebrating right now. I wouldn't normally pull out my best shirt when I know I'm about to drizzle gravy all over it while slicing into that meat. But I did it because today, I'm celebrating a verdict. My ex-daughter-in-law, sentenced to 3 years for fraud. And her charming mother? 18 months for helping her. That's right. Justice works. And I'm here to toast to that. I'm also raising a glass to the fact that we've locked up 2 free spirits exactly where they belong, behind bars. The irony is just too perfect. And yes, I carefully selected the wine for tonight's celebration. It's not that I haven't had a meal like this since last time, but tonight, the gravy is on point, the meat is premium, and I've got ice cream waiting for dessert. It's taking all my strength not to stop writing and dig in immediately. But I know many of you out there hated those 2 just as much as I did, so if there are people celebrating with me tonight from afar, cheers to you too. As for my son, there's not much to report. Or maybe there is, but it's not important enough to risk missing dinner. So this update ends here. Update 6. It's been so long since I wrote that first post, I'm not even sure how many of you remember it. Maybe you never even read it, and this is the first time you're hearing about me, my son, and the sewer rat he married. Oh, and her mother, the giant rodent version. When I told him that marrying someone after just 3 months wasn't just a bad idea, but basically like shooting yourself in the foot with a pirate ship cannon, he got mad. He shouted at me, said if I didn't stop interfering with him and his fiancée, he'd file a restraining order against me. I'm the kind of guy who gets the hint. I let him make his own choices. And if you're wondering how those turned out, well, just read my previous updates. Now he's divorced, has a better job, and has even managed to rent his own apartment. Of course, since he declared bankruptcy, no one wants to accept the standard first and last month deposit. They want 6 months up front. But somehow, he managed. Good for him. He reached out to me recently, told me all of this, how hard it was to scrape together the 6 months' rent. But, of course, the conversation came with a but, and the saddest little violin music in the background. He didn't wonder, didn't wish, didn't think aloud, he asked. He asked if the money I'd saved for him was still available. He wanted a car. I told him no. Or rather, yes, it's still there. But no, not for him. At least not to buy a car. He got mad, said he'd made a lot of progress and that I was being stingy for still holding a grudge. I told him I wasn't mad, I was proving a point. That he still hadn't grown up. And that's exactly why the money wasn't getting touched. I then asked him to leave. And that's when he started harassing me. Which led to me filing a restraining order against him. I'll spare you the details of the harassment. But one night, he started pounding on my windows, my door, and anything else he could find, demanding I let him in. And of course, it had to be on a special night. I was ready to eat my favorite meal. Yes, I know. Again. Sue me, I like roast meat with mashed potatoes and gravy. Some people love burgers, some love pizza. I love my gravy. So I called the cops. My food went cold. And I had to keep an eye on the mashed potatoes to make sure none of the cops dipped a spoon in while they were at my house. Not that the restraining order was only because of that incident, but it sealed the deal. Since then, I've had peace. It's been over a month. Quiet, uninterrupted nights. That's what matters to me. I don't care how far away his new job is. I don't care if that apartment is the only one he can afford. There's a lesson here. Don't get married without thinking. And don't mess with my special dinner nights.